Welcome to 7th episode of The Long View. Today's episode we are going to discuss reading China, India's challenge from Himalayas to the Taiwan Strait. And we couldn't have asked for a better, more informed, more illustrious guest than Professor Srikanth Kondapalli. First, starting with India-China relations, because we are poised at a difficult juncture.
Given the Galwan clashes, 20 Indian soldiers passed away and an estimated 4 by the Chinese side assessment. That has upset the bilateral relations.
Do you see India and China being able to address some of the more critical, more substantive issues?
So this is generally termed as third-party role. Chinese would say since then that India is siding with the United States. India as a balancer to China is one of the American ideas.
And any deterrence, matrix we had with China, the role of external balancing has been eroded.
Asymmetric deterrence. Asymmetry, of course, we know there is $19 trillion GDP of China and $4 trillion GDP of India. China spends officially $290 billion in defense budget. We spend about $80 billion in defense budget.
Welcome to 7th episode of The Long View. Let me first of all tell you something about Long View, what's it all about, why we have this podcast series, which is a conversation space created by Subhash Chandra Bose Chair of Chanakya University. It's a space for India-centric, evidence-based discussions on forces and trends that are shaping today's chaotic world. Trends which are seldom caught in headlines today, for which you need to step back a little, look at continuities, but also look at ruptures, and then identify what is really happening in the world today. For that, we have an interlocutor, a guest who is a subject expert, and we discuss one particular issue in every episode. Today's episode, we are going to discuss reading China, India's challenge from Himalayas to the Taiwan Strait. And we couldn't have asked for a better, more informed, more illustrious guest than Professor Srikanth Kondapalli. Welcome, Srikanth, to The Long View. Srikanth is, I can say without any exaggeration, one of the leading sinologists of the country. He has been observing China very closely for 3 decades. He is a professor of Chinese studies in the School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. He was earlier Dean of SIS. And one unique feature that he brings to his research is, his ability to go to original documents, Chinese language documents, because he was trained in China for an extended period, including for his postdoctoral fellowship. He did some really remarkable work on the PLA. His first book on PLA and transition, then a subsequent monograph on PLA Navy, and he has gone on to build a very impressive portfolio of publications. He is a commentator on China on various platforms, and of course, he is an extremely, admired teacher of Chinese studies. So welcome again, Srikanth, to this show. I thought what we can do today is to, see what are the debates taking place about China, First, starting with India-China relations, because we are poised at a difficult juncture in trajectory of India-China relations. Uh, it's already more than 6 years since Galwan tragedy. It's close to 2 years since Prime Minister Modi met with the President Xi at Kazan, which led to beginning of process of re-engagement. Some steps have been taken to put relations back on a more stable footing. Yet, if you look at situation along the borders, it remains highly militarized. It's still stable but not normal. Likewise, there have been some progress towards resuming people-centric contacts, business links, but we are far from returning to a normal state of affairs in their China relations, either along the borders or in relationship as a whole. How will you characterize the present state of India-China relations? Do you see are moving towards a reset, a genuine thaw, or it's only a sort of tactical change which has taken place? And what will you prognosis for, say, next 2-3 years of India-China relations?
Thank you very much, Ambassador Ashok Kantha, for this invite. I'm deeply honored and delighted to be part of this podcast. How do we characterize the current India-China relations? Given the Galwan clashes, 20 Indian soldiers passed away and an estimated 4 by the Chinese side assessment. That has upset the bilateral relations. As Dr. Jaishankar said 2 days after the June 15th incident, unless until the border stability is achieved, we will not have the bilateral relations improved. Since then, we have had so many discussions, the WMCC meeting, the Corps Commander level meetings, and then the special representative meetings. We had so many other talks, back channel talks as well. You rightly mentioned about the Kazan meeting on October 23rd, 2024, and a decision taken in terms of normalizing relations. We have subsequently we had the Tianjin meeting of the SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, where Prime Minister Modi visited China to attend the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting. We also had a 45-minute meeting between the two leaders, opening up the bilateral relations into different fields. So, in this background, we can say that before Galwan, we had about 30 structured dialogues. The strategic dialogue by the foreign ministries, the strategic and economic dialogues between Niti Aayog and NDRC. There is the annual defense dialogue between two defense ministries. There was also the youth dialogue. There is a financial dialogue. There is a steel dialogue. There is there used to be think tank to think tank, media to media, and a lot of MOUs. So about 30 structured dialogues. All of these were shut down because of the Galwan incident. And we also had some restrictions on the Chinese apps, 218 applications, IT applications, restrictions on Chinese investments in the infrastructure projects in border areas, and also shutdown of the Confucius Institutes or Confucius classrooms in India. So these restrictions have not yet been lifted, and we also have not diversified other than the WMCC Corps Commander level, SR level meeting. So in other words, this situation of normalization is not extended into all other areas. Trade is happening, but that is between the private sector in India and state-owned and private sector in China. So this is slightly abnormal. And so how do we characterize? I would say this is stalemate, but in a positive way. Stalemate in the sense there is movement. India gives less visas compared to the Chinese 85,000 visas issued last year. We issued some 4,500 visas and estimated, which means that India is still reluctant to open up to China. So this can be characterized as stalemate, but in a positive way, not in a negative way, because there is the doors are open, but not fully. And so we can say it is a stalemate. The stalled dialogues in 27 other areas, and but then there is also the glass is quarter filled with these. So it's a positive stalemate. Yeah.
No, I think you have described it very well. Looking ahead, I would like to expand the conversation a little bit because what happens in India-China relations is not always bilateral. It's shaped quite significantly by what's happening around us in the world, by larger, geopolitical context in which this relationship is developed. Uh, do you think that context is becoming more challenging? I'll just refer to a couple of developments there. Something you have commented upon quite a bit in your writings. China tends to look at India through prism of its strategic contestation with the USA. But in last several months, especially since Busan summit between President Xi and President Trump, one can see a very deliberate effort by two countries to stabilize relations. We saw during the Beijing summit in May that Washington accepted a construct proposed by China of a strategic constructive relationship stability, which was actually for the first time in several years when USA accepted the Chinese framework. They're very reluctant to do that. In fact, you commented that Trump left Beijing empty-handed. And there was this perception that in this game where Trump, in fact, had been proposed a G2 kind of arrangement, China perceives a certain advantage at this point of time vis-a-vis USA. At the same time, in parallel, there is a visual stress in India-US relations. The way USA looks at India, is no longer so keen to look at India as a strategic counterpoise to China. And China is aware of these developments. Now, how do you see this context where we are under some pressure from both Washington DC and Beijing? Because Beijing is not so keen to make concessions at a time when they think we are under pressure and we are coming to them from a position of weakness. This double squeeze, do you see India and China being able to address some of the more critical, more substantive issues in relations, or are staying with what China calls sometimes low-hanging fruits? For instance, their proposal that we agree to a separate settlement on Sikkim, normalize our business relations. Where do you see our going? Are we going towards a more stable, balanced relationship which caters to our concerns and interests, or something which will be more along the lines of Chinese preference?
As you rightly mentioned, there is a balance of power shift The Chinese have become the second largest economy, and they are at the center of supply chain mechanisms. They are now, with the Belt and Road Initiative, $1.4 trillion of investment and other concepts. They seems to be having an edge overall in the international relations. It has not yet, of course, translated into power terms, but this is the background. We also have the Americans recognizing the China rise. There used to be a bipartisan consensus within the United States on countering China rise in one way or the other. Successive national security strategy documents mention about pacing challenger, strategic competition, small yard, high fence, or other phrases over a period of time since roughly the mid 2000s, also coinciding with the 123 agreement with India, the civil nuclear agreement. So this is generally termed as third party role. Chinese would say since then that India is siding with the United States as a part of the natural allies, that is democracies. And as Condoleezza Rice, the former Secretary of State, mentioned in Sophia University in 2005 about helping India to become a major power in 21st century. In that background, the Chinese had expressed some concerns on the US-India relations because that has transformed into a lot of foundational agreements between India and China, the Lemova, Becca, Sismova, and others. Also the arms transfer that has taken place between United States and China and India. So in this background, they have expressed concerns on US-India relations. To my mind, it is unfair that China had raised the US and India relations growing trajectory, because this actually violates the Panchsheel principles on how India shapes its foreign policy is India's business, not China's business. And so this is a very unfair position that China had taken, that US-India relations have been of concern to China. China, of course, when India raises the third party role, we mention about Pakistan and the all-weather friendship between China and Pakistan. As you know, the Chinese have transferred the nuclear weapons, ballistic missiles, and roughly 54% of their arms transfer is to South Asia and specifically to Pakistan. Roughly about $24 billion has been transferred so far to Pakistan. And India has a concern because Pakistan utilizes many of these equipments supplied to Pakistan to counter India. We have seen this in 1965, 1971, during Kargil in 99, during the Operation Sindoor last year in May. Many of the Chinese equipment have been used by Pakistan, and in the last conflict in Operation Sindoor, we saw active Chinese role on the side of the Pakistanis. So when India says third party role, it is the role of Pakistan and China. The Chinese mention about US and India relations. India as a balancer to China is one of the American ideas since 2005, since Condoleezza Rice's speech. However, with President Trump announcing G2, this is taken off. The balancer role is taken off, at least in a peripheral ways. So India loses that kind of leverage, which it used to have for the past 21 years roughly. And so there is a paradigm shift between China, US, and India. So this is one angle. The second angle is that the the Americans, even though they have taken a position that China issue should be addressed, as it happened in their QDR, NSS, and other documents. But we saw Trump administration completely changing that dynamics with the latest NSS mentioning China not as a challenger and also removing the words Indo-Pacific to Asia-Pacific, removing Indo-PACOM into the original Pacific Command, and Shangri-La dialogue speeches by Hexed, the Secretary of Defense, not mentioning much about the South China Sea and other issues. All these indicated that China-US angle is getting traction, and the Trump administration's tariffs on China have been now reduced, while, as you rightly mentioned, the India tariffs have increased substantially. And President Trump also mentioned about zero growth rate in India, and some colorful words were also used by him in relation to depicting India. So this is the context where the Chinese would like to seek more diplomatic concessions from the United States on South Asia. Of course, even before they were seeking such concessions, if you remember, the Obama-Hu Jintao joint statement mentions about South Asia. And while the Chinese say that this is under the American pressure that they have included South Asia in the 2009 joint statement, nevertheless, that is one thread that is passing through the G2 thread that is active in the US-China relations. So it is right to say that the changed global strategic situation resulted in China upping the ante on India and seeking more concessions on this. The Chinese ban on rare earth metals on the US and actually on everybody else. It's only when Dr. Jaishankar went to Beijing last June, we saw the germanium, gallium, and other rare earth metals ban has been lifted by China selectively, but that Damocles sword is still hanging, the rare earth metals. So, in other words, China is leveraging.
Still subject to end use certification and
Exactly.
all the paperwork. So
Yes, so the ifs and buts are still there, and this is the reason why India joined the Silica, Pax Silica, and also recent visits by Prime Minister Modi to Australia and Indonesia to look at the critical minerals related matter. So China has some leverages and it is trying to use against all, including on India and the United States. And to an extent it is successful. I would say short term, because in the medium to long term, we will all have the supply chain restoration, the critical minerals, or other trade weaponization that China had done before. So, in other words, the US, China, India triangle, which some Chinese have actually floated before, has now become slightly more skewed in nature. So it is advantage China to an extent, but India is no pushover in this context, and the recent visits by Prime Minister Modi to different countries, the free trade agreement signed with EU, UK, Oman, New Zealand, the trade upgradation with Australia, with Japan and other countries indicated that we also have something up our sleeve, and we are trying to kind of find our feet in this international system. It is slightly skewed in favor of China right now, but India is no pushover on this scope.
I would like to tell listeners that Professor Srikanth Kondapalli, he has done pioneering work on China's PLA and also on, our defense equation with China. So I'll take our conversation in that direction. As Professor Kondapalli rightly brought out, and something I entirely agree with, I've also been writing along those lines. The larger picture has shifted to our disadvantage and to China's advantage. And any deterrence, uh, you know, matrix we had with China, the role of external balancing has been eroded. That's a point, Srikanth made. So I would like to ask him that, as you rightly pointed out, uh, we can't really depend so much on USA when it comes to any continental conflict with China. You also referred to developments in China-Pakistan relations. We saw last year, in May last year, during Operation Sindoor, how there was, one can say, unprecedented level of operational collusion between China and Pakistan. So, in a way, we have moved into new territory. When we are dealing with Pakistan, China will be an ever-present factor in a military conflict, also providing support to Pakistan. In this more complicated context, how do you see, asymmetric deterrence, which is talked about very often in India's strategic community? Uh, what are the components of asymmetric deterrence? Is it a doctrine, or it's still just some kind of talking point? What does it involve? Does it involve uh, you know deterrence by denial, deterrence by punishment, deterrence by resilience? Uh, what are the components? So, as someone who has studied this subject deeply, I would like you to share your thoughts with our listeners on nature of asymmetric deterrence strategy we are supposedly developing vis-a-vis China, and to certain extent vis-a-vis both China and Pakistan.
That's a very interesting topic, sir. It's not yet an official doctrine because we don't find anything in the official media. We also do not find it in some of the esteemed military thinkers' writings yet. So let's break down this concept, asymmetric deterrence. Asymmetry, of course, we know there is $19 trillion GDP of China and $4 trillion GDP of India. China spends officially $290 billion in defense budget. We spend about $80 billion in defense budget. They have $10 trillion of investment in infrastructure. We have less than $1 trillion in infrastructure spending. So asymmetries compound in every sphere, civil, military, and other spheres. So there is how do we address this asymmetry? So there is the suggestion that we first find the Achilles heel of China in order to address those asymmetries. The second concept is deterrence, and deterrence we generally know is imposing maximum possible punishment, denial or punishment. We used to practice denial because of the 1962 background and other Chinese coercive diplomatic statements given on the border situation and on others. For example, Tulung La in 1975, Samdurongchu in 1987, the Depsan Plains in 2003. You have also the Doklam and Galwan in 2017 and 2020. So we did see there is a lot of coercive diplomatic pressure emanating from Beijing. So when India used deterrence both in conventional and nuclear domain, it has used primarily against Pakistan. Deterrence posture in nuclear domain, and in general on the nuclear domain we have minimum credible nuclear deterrence as a broader announcement. Although we tweak this by suggesting that if there is an attack on India by chemical weapons or others, we will forego the no first use, and we will be modulating in a first use mode. We have also recently, about a month ago, we have mated the warheads with the launchers selectively, which indicates that we are in a slightly more advanced position in the deterrence posture. Vis-a-vis China, we have the no first use. They also have the no first use since 1964. But we have used extensively dissuasion in terms of the nuclear factor with China. Deterrence with Pakistan, dissuasion with China. Dissuasion is generally through CBMs, confidence building measures. Dissuasion is through dialogue process. Dissuasion is through official negotiations. For example, in the strategic dialogue between the two foreign ministries, a few minutes were spent on the nuclear dimension. Routinely, it has become stale because once the Indian side would say that we should have some escalatory control procedures, the Chinese would brush aside saying that India is not a nuclear power. And India should abide by the 1172 resolution in the Security Council. On the other hand, India gradually also began shifting from dissuasion on a journey towards deterrence vis-a-vis China. For example, the DRDO has built canisterized weapon systems, 24/7 launch systems through solid propellants in Agni series of missile batteries. We have also deployed some of these in Assam, and so that's at the nuclear domain. At the conventional domain, India has raised mountain strike forces. So this is basically conventional deterrence postures, and the cold start doctrine that we used to have on Pakistan has now been in a way shifted towards China. We have deployed some of the strike corps which used to be against Pakistan, now been shifted to China. These postures suggest that we are tweaking the traditional deterrence postures. In 2009, the Indian Armed Forces began to accept a slightly higher threat level, and two-front war under nuclear threshold has been mentioned at the time, and the Indian Armed Forces have been constantly preparing for that kind of scenario, which means basically two-front war under nuclear threshold means Pakistan, China, and nuclear threshold. In a situation where Pakistan and China will combine both in conventional as well as in the nuclear domain. And so how do we prepare? So we have about roughly 16, 17 years of experience in this, in the armed forces planning. And you may recall in the reports we deployed the S-400 systems between Pakistan and China, somewhere in Jammu and Kashmir. This indicates that we are practicing the two-front war under nuclear threshold related scenarios, and it basically then means deployment of BrahMos regiments in the northeast, and deployment of various conventional platforms on the northern borders. and also going into ISR, the intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, space, and cyber domains. So we see that the Indian side had mobilized both the land forces as well as air forces, and it is now in the process of transiting to theater commands, which is a project that Indian armed forces are trying to build up, while China has already graduated to what they call CABization, combined arms brigade process in Tibet and other regions. So given the kind of asymmetries we face both in conventional and the nuclear domain from China, so the asymmetric deterrence is talked about. So it basically includes how do we address the DF-21D, DF-16, DF-26, Tungfang 26, and other missile systems placed by China in Talinga, Shaochaidam, Tachaidam in Qinghai province, and also the conventional superiority that China has over India. But here the problem is, of course, China has extended supply lines into Tibet from the Chengdu military headquarters, the Western Theater Command, to Tibet forward areas. There is a lot of problems in terms of the logistics, in terms of hostile terrain, high altitude terrain. If they plan to wage multi-domain operations, this is actually not a given for China. The costs on China are also higher. And so India is preparing for this kind of a scenario. I do not think India's asymmetric deterrence is to defeat China, but to see to it that we don't have surprises like Galwan. We don't have surprises like Doklam when the Chinese started building a road to Zamferi Ridge. So it doesn't have the same kind of offensive features that are attributed to deterrence. So India's game plan is still defensive in nature, so that they don't surprise us. This is important to understand because while Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping were talking in Chennai, in Mahabalipuram in October 2019, simultaneously 2 brigades, 10,000 troops began moving from Aksu in Xinjiang and overrunning the Depsang plains, cutting off our patrols position towards the borders, the line of actual control. So that was a big surprise. We were lulled into the belief that China will go by the script on CBMs that we signed since 1988. And we placed our confidence in the Chinese. And we learned once again a lesson in Galwan.
Yeah.
So asymmetric deterrence is basically to defend ourselves, and so that we have no surprise again, because in 1962 Nehru passed away with that shame, and no other leadership in India wants to take that kind of position once again. So asymmetric deterrence is to prepare well so that we are not surprised.
Just to sort of pick a thread from what you just said, I know you talked about a two-front challenge under nuclear overhang. This is a formulation which is not very often used. Two-front challenge is there. Now, when we had a standoff situation in Eastern Ladakh beginning summer of 2020, during that period, there wasn't any talk of a nuclear dimension being introduced. I recall in his book Choices, former National Security Advisor Shiv Shankar Menon, he argues that there is a basic equilibrium in the nuclear dimension between India and China, despite disparity in size of the nuclear arsenal of two countries, and that equilibrium is likely to continue, possibly at a higher technological level, as both countries move up the technology chain in nuclear matters. But there have been developments recently, over the last 5 years or so, which cause some concern whether that basic equilibrium is under stress. And I wanted to have your comments on that. I'll just flag, 2, 3 developments. The one, of course, is rapid increase in size of China's, nuclear arsenal, and projected present perhaps 600 plus, likely to go up to 1,000 by 2030, 1,500 by 2035. If you go by Western estimates, we don't have our own estimates, but there is enough evidence to suggest that size of the nuclear arsenal is growing. That's one. Second aspect is, of course, continued modernization of the nuclear weaponry, also moving into hypersonics and different areas. Third, one can see a significant change in the nuclear doctrine. To my mind, perhaps that's more, worrisome. They're talking about early warning counter-strike, which is really launch and warning posture. Or in the strategic literature, no first use being qualified in so many different ways. In a way, even early warning counter-strike goes against grain of no first use. And finally, China developing capabilities, counterforce capability using conventional weapons, which will not be effective against USA, but they might be effective against India. They might, sort of degrade our second strike capability. So how do you look at this, especially in the light of what you commented earlier, two-front situation under nuclear overhang? How worried we should be about these developments in China's both nuclear posture and the doctrine?
Interesting points. What we saw during Galwan or during other testing times between India and China, the N word was never used by the two leaderships. And so this is more of speculation than there is background preparation both sides are doing, but there is no N word being used in. The Chinese use the word xiaoshuqian, an assassin's mace weapon, and we do not know exactly what that weapon is in the Chinese inventory. Some speculated that this is an electromagnetic spectrum weapon. Some commented that this could be some kind of a BMD, ballistic missile defense, or a HGV, hypersonic glide vehicle, which has also now entered the Chinese inventory. From an Indian perspective, Prime Minister Modi visited Ladakh, Leh, soon after the Galwan incident. In his speeches, he mentioned Sudarshan Chakra, which is a traditional way of looking at the Vishnu carrying the Sudarshan Chakra. So an ultimate weapon system that is generally used as a standoff weapon. But many commentators suggested the Sudarshan Chakra is not a nuclear weapon, but it is a ballistic missile defense. Say, for example, S-400, which we acquired when Raksha Mantri Rajnath Singh went to Moscow in September 2020, soon after the Galwan incident. And the Russians gave us those weapon systems, 9 weapon systems, including the S-400s. So the nearest we went was this Xiaoshuqian and the Sudarshan Chakra against each other, but not exactly the nuclear weapon. But in reality, as you rightly mentioned, the stockpile in China is increasing. China has some roughly about 42 places where they can generate highly enriched uranium or plutonium. Plutonium has now been kind of downgraded in their nuclear systems, but enriched uranium and the estimates of the RAND Corporation, Albright, and Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, they suggest, as you rightly mentioned, from the current 600 to roughly about 1500 warheads preparation. In Yumei and other areas in Xinjiang and Qinghai, there are also plans to construct ICBM silos and an overall spending of $32 billion only for this purpose has been reported by the Pentagon papers on the PLA. Every June they come out with these. So China is making preparations in the nuclear domain, but I think it is mainly the United States as a target. Even though in their PLA rocket forces reorganization and their doctrine, the white paper issued on national defense suggested that they will have medium to long range firepower. Medium to long range would mean an IRBM or an ICBM. IRBM is where India comes in terms of the coverage that it has from Qinghai. If you have a radius, it's roughly about 2,200 kilometers, roughly adding to an IRBM. ICBMs, of course, are, as the recent SLBM J3, JL3 test indicated, the target is the United States or its allies far away in faraway regions. It doesn't mean China has given up on India in the nuclear domain. We see that, as you rightly mentioned, there is the launch on warning and launch under attack. Increasingly, the Chinese literature on the nuclear issues speak about limited nuclear deterrence under launch on warning and launch under attacks. Launch under attack is a quick way of retaliating, and Chinese scientists they started suggesting openly that if the adversary is going to attack their ICBM silos, or if the adversary is going to attack the strategic hubs. In China, the strategic hub is the Putung Special Economic Zone, Shenzhen Special Economic Zone, the Three Gorges Dam, or other strategic assets, including possibly Chungnanhai and other leadership compounds. So the argument is that China needs to now retaliate, forego the NFU, no first use, and then retaliate. Instead of giving space for the adversary to damage the strategic hubs in China, China should quickly retaliate, which also puts a lot of stress on the early warning systems. China needs to have these space-based systems, which it already has, 224 Peito series of satellites and other satellites have been launched by China. So it does have the space capabilities, as we recently saw in the Iran conflict, in Venezuelan conflict, in Gaza conflict, and the Russia-Ukraine conflict. But China also needs to have the THAAD system, which it doesn't have currently. So it indicates that China has to forego the no first use, and transit into a first use in order to deter the United States on the nuclear issue. So a lot of churning process is happening within China, but what is missing is India in all of this. Even though the PLA rocket forces mentions about medium to long range strikes. Medium is where India comes in terms of the Asian portion. Japan, other countries as well, Australia. So that is what we can say as of now in terms of the Chinese nuclear doctrine.
Uh, well, Shrikant, let me close where the series always returns to the long view. So I have one final question for you. You know, you have been watching China very carefully for last 3 decades. You have seen the transition taking place from Deng Xiaoping's, 24 character dictum, in brief, described as hide and bite approach, to Xi Jinping's more assertive policy stance. Nature of China challenge for India has changed. I'll not go into that in this today's conversation. We'll have another conversation on that. I wanted your comment on whether there's an India problem in dealing with China challenge. In terms of our preparedness, in terms of our response, whether it be in the area of economy, we have China Shock 2.0 unfolding. Are we prepared to deal with that? Or in terms of defense, defense indigenization, our ability to do things on our own rather than depending on others. In terms of putting our act together in our neighborhood, rather than remaining obsessed with China, upping our own game in neighborhood. In all these dimensions, if you have to give 3 recommendations over structural, not this is not for catching headlines tomorrow, but over next 10 years, all these deficiencies plus a basic problem we had, reading China right. Investing in China studies, having more people like you, who can go to original Chinese language material and make sense of what's happening in that country. What will be, briefly, 3 recommendations you'll make to be executed over the next 1 decade?
I want to come back to asymmetry, and because this is what is the overhanging. North Korea has a GDP of $52 billion or so. They don't declare this. And United States has a $33 trillion GDP. Yet Kim Jong-un forced Trump to go to Singapore and Hanoi. And a $19 trillion GDP like China also forced Trump to announce a G2 and the strategic stability related matters. I think there is something at the political leadership level, both in North Korea and in China, on how to address this asymmetry. What we generally call in IR, international relations, the hard power and also the hard stance that the leadership can take. I'm not suggesting here wolf warrior diplomacy. I'm not suggesting anything new, but so we, in the background of the asymmetry related, there is something that we need to learn from China and North Korea on how the leadership can assert itself given the asymmetries. There is so much of asymmetry between China and the United States: technology, military, economy, structural power, as Susan Strange mentions, soft power, and many other areas. Yet the Chinese were able to force the Trump administration to climb down, even if temporarily. So there is something that our diplomacy, our leadership needs to learn from this aspect and try to experiment with that portion. In terms of the possible 3, obviously there is no other alternative other than building up our own comprehensive national power. We are currently at around 6th position in the global CNP rankings. So we need to focus on the CNP, comprehensive national power. That's which includes economy, military, infrastructure, energy consumption, technological prowess. So the PLI scheme, the semiconductor industry policy recently would all add up to those aspects in the Skill India, Digital India, and other things. So there is no other shortcut other than the CNP increase, CNP focus, which in itself acts as a deterrence once we have those things in place. The second, of course, is the analysis of China in, as Dr. Jaishankar mentions, in the India way, not in an emotional, not in a other ways, but to view India in a realist perspective. I think that is a good suggestion made by the EAM in his book. And so I think in terms of a scholarship, we need to look at that. In the last 3 days of conference on Indo-centric foreign policy posture, something other to learn, and I learned in these 3 days, is to look at the indigenous knowledge that we have had. We probably may not have applied these more concertedly, but there is something that we can learn from the Kautilya's Ardhashastra and other texts, Vidur Niti or other texts, and find our own indigenous ways to address the China issue. I think we need to go back to our texts to read them more carefully, because China is doing the same. Yan Xuetung began in Tsinghua University the simulation exercises, and he has a lot of thousands of students attending these courses. Secondly, he had been reviving the idea of Middle Kingdom, and he is going back to the warring states, the various Sun Tzu, Mozu, I mean many other.
Yan Xuetung is a leading IR scholar of China based in Tsinghua University.
Yeah, so I think we need to be more concerted in that direction.
Well, thank you, Srikanth. This is a conversation we can carry on for a long time, but I believe you have given us a lot of food for thought, how to look at China challenge and also how to prepare for it, including through building our own scholarship on that country. So thank you very much. So we'll conclude the 7th episode of The Long View here with one request, that the viewers and listeners should pass the word around for this platform, which is available because we have substantive conversations with experts like Professor Srikanth Kondapalli. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.